Good. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining myself and John today. We're going to go over some of the cybersecurity insurance requirements. If your business hasn't got it, it's definitely something you need to look into. We require it as a managed service provider, and I know John's going to shed some light on exactly what you should be looking for, what some of the requirements are now. We'll look into some of the Canadian um, uh, compliance that may be coming to Canada from our friends in the South, what regulations are coming around, and that sort of thing. And then what we'll do is when John wraps up, then we'll do a 15 to 20-minute questions at the end of that. So I just know some of the questions I have for John. I thought I'd bring the insurance expert on here for his opinion on some of the most common questions. One of the number one questions we hear a lot is, if I have cybersecurity insurance, am I protected from threats? Why do I need you? And some of our clients naturally assume that if they're on a managed service plan or a cybersecurity firm, that they're automatically protected without having to have their own policies. So we'll dive into that. I'm just going to hand it over to John right now, and we'll go back and forth with things. So without further ado, here's John.
Yeah, love it. Thanks, Corey, and thanks for having me on. Excited to talk a bit about cyber insurance today and really how that plays a role in the cybersecurity landscape as a whole, and really kind of touch on, what does cyber risk, how's that looking for the SMB space, and how do SMBs really kind of address this moving forward and take into consideration obviously the tool side of things, the insurance side of things, and another angle you already mentioned, the compliancy side of things.
Absolutely.
So let's just jump right on in. So
Sounds
to
great.
give everybody a little bit of background, I'm John Reith. I work with Datastream Cyber Insurance. We are an expert. We're an expert insurance brokerage that focuses exclusively on cyber insurance. We also have access to pretty much the entire cyber insurance market. It's about 40 plus carriers that we work with to help our customers and MSP partners navigate the space. And just to give you a little bit of background, and so that you understand that some of the numbers and things that you might see further along in the webinar are not just us, kind of licking our fingers and sticking it in the wind. The data that you're going to see in this webinar actually comes from our parent company, Envelop Risk, who actually sits behind all the carriers that we work with as a reinsurer. And they sit on one of, if not the largest data set of cyber insurance globally. It's about 90% of the global cyber insurance data. So all these numbers that we're going to review today, just know that it's not, us just kind of sticking our fingers up in the wind. So, initially, we want to touch on what is the risk that the smaller and medium-sized businesses are facing. I don't think anybody here necessarily is going to be surprised by some of these numbers, right? I think you probably attending this because you might be hearing about some of the attacks that are going on in the small and medium-sized space. But the point being that it is happening across the board, right? It's really not a matter of size or industry anymore. It really is more about open and closed doors. These guys are really just going around checking doorknobs, and it's important to think that it's not a matter of if it's going to happen to you, it's really a matter of when. And a number I do like to point out on this slide is for attacks that do succeed, 25% of those companies end up filing for bankruptcy. So unfortunately, when these attacks are successful, they can be really detrimental to the business and often brings them down, unfortunately.
And we actually
But
hear a lot about it
yeah,
too, John. So I think anybody here is going to know of at least one company that's had a ransomware attack at some point. I know
yeah.
that we face it. It may not hit the media mainstream, but there's definitely a lot more businesses out there being hit than what people are aware of.
Yeah, no, and it's a great point to bring up. the ransomware aspect of this of these attacks was really one of the biggest bridge gap, almost kind of bridge gappers for when they made the jump from kind of the enterprise space to down to the SMB space, because really everybody's got some sort of data or is doing work online, right? Where half of, sometimes a majority of their business is being run online. But in this day and age, it's very hard to find a company who has no aspect of their business connected to online somehow, right? And that
Absolutely.
gives the bad actors that ability to come in. And just like we're seeing here on this slide, right? It's not even so much more, of course, there's still, the money aspect of it. But the real reason, the smaller guys are being targeted is because most people, they have some sort of data, right? Whether or not it's credit card transactions or even just personal identifying information of their employees. Everybody's got some sort of data. Or another big reason that ransoms are hitting is because they can't afford to be down, right? So if they can come in and ransom you and kind of shut you down for a perceivable amount of time, and you're expected as a company to be open, maybe 24/7 or maybe just during business hours, obviously that's going to affect your ability to run business, affect your reputation, and that's how they're able to ransom you that way. So, yeah, you nailed it on the head. The ransom side of things are really a big, a bridge gapper. And unfortunately, I mean, it's not necessarily a huge surprise. The smaller medium guys are still catching up a bit, right?
Mhm.
Still really underprepared. It's why, they're kind of seen as easy targets right now,
That's
right?
right.
Is a lot of folks still kind of playing catch up, still working on getting folks, getting things like cybersecurity training in place, actually having that, security plan in place when the need does arise. All of these are things to be thinking about as an SMB, because there are reasons, unfortunately, that you're being targeted, right?
Right.
Um, this slide I do like to touch on. It's something that I think is really eye-opening to see, that it's happening across the board for all sizes, right? That's really what this is about. And this is another example of the data sets that we get access to from our parent company. But you can really start to see as we scroll down, we're looking at sizes here, right? Of a
Mhm.
set of 4,000 insurance claims. What we're really trying to focus on here is the sizes of these companies that were having these claims. So we can even see all the way down to the 0 to 10 employee count for these sizes. We're still seeing, tough losses, right? And maybe not necessarily as high as we continue up, but as a 0 to a 10 employee, could you handle an average, loss of the $100,000 range?
And
But
that's
also important to think about worst case for insurance, because that's
right.
what insurance is there for, right?
And this, correct me if I'm wrong, John, but this is all U.S. dollars too, right? So I mean, as Canadians, spike that up. That's going to be a lot more money for us.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, you're 100% correct in that. I do need to make a version of this now that has the Canadian translation on it. Now that we have the ability, that's a good point. Because you're right, it'll be even more in terms of dollars and cents there. Um, so how do we address this problem? Right, this problem of cyber risks that SMBs face on a day-to-day basis. It's addressed in a similar way that we address other risks that we face as a business. Right, if we think about the risk of fire, it's handled in really two steps. Number one, investing in your own resources, right? The tools and the technologies that are ultimately going to reduce that risk, right? And that risk being the frequency and the severity of those incidents, right? So think of, for fire, your smoke alarms, as we have the picture here, are fire extinguishers, right? The sprinklers that businesses are required to have in their buildings. All of these things are the tools and technologies that help reduce that potential incident, right? But then that's balanced with investing in collective resources. And just like fire, cyber is no different, right? We invest on the fire side of things into things like a fire department or fire insurance, right? And it's
Yeah.
the exact same on the cyber side of things, right? We're going to balance those tools and technologies with the actual insurance itself. And so as we move forward, I like to kind of continue that metaphor because I think it's a nice one to think of when we're connecting these tools and technologies. And that big question that you asked in the beginning of, well, if I have the tools and technologies, why do I need the insurance? And if I have the insurance, why do I need the tools and technologies, right? Because it's truly about a balance, and all of the other risks that we address on a day-to-day basis are the exact same.
Mhm.
So that first one though, the how do you reduce risk in terms of the tools and the technologies, right? And that's really going to be Corey and C3's cup of tea, right? But these are some of the things that we consider also from the insurance side of things, what they're really looking for, right? Number one, investing in your cybersecurity program, right? Getting some, and that really looks like getting some of these basic cybersecurity controls in place that we're going to talk about. These are some of the ones that we're going to talk about today. Some of these controls, the carriers without them will actually not even touch you, right? They're actually almost hard requirements. You can think of them. And number three is also incredibly important, is planning for failure, right? Controls, tools are tools, and humans are humans, right? And that's never going to change. Bad actors are always trying to break tools, and human error is not going to go away, right? So having that layered approach to cybersecurity is incredibly important, right? The balance, once again, between the tools and the insurance side of things.
Absolutely.
Um, and at the bottom, I always like to mention having the IR plan. It's some sort of instant response and recovery plan, even if it's a simple, printed out copy of the important phone numbers and who to call. Having a hard copy instant response plan can be so detrimental during the actual first, few minutes of that incident. Because think if you have your system bricked up and all your phones, all the phone numbers are in that system, how are you making the calls that
That's
you
right.
need to?
And just knowing what everybody's role is when they're doing that. So yes, this is something that we heavily rely on in our business to make sure that all of our clients are have an instant response plan of some sort. Some are a little more advanced, and some are fairly simple, depending on their business and that. But having that in place and knowing what to do when that time arises that you need that is critical.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about that recovery speed, really, right? And being
Right.
able to have the important information in front of you ASAP during that incident, right? And we are, yeah. I should have switched slides because it really is. We were just talking about it,
Yeah.
right? The incident response plan, how important that really can play a role during the incident itself and getting back up to speed,
Mhm.
right? So the technologies itself, obviously, getting those in place are incredibly important. And in fact, as we just discussed, are often a requirement to actually obtain the cyber risk, right? So you want to get those tools and technologies in place to actually reduce that frequency and severity, and then you transfer the remaining cyber risk to insurance, the risk that you can't eliminate, right? And in fact, that goes with one in hand with the other because of those requirements, right? The tools and technologies, now you're going to need those in order to get a decent insurance policy in place, because obviously the carriers understand that those tools and technologies are helping mitigate the potential incident that may arise, right? So what is though the difference between some of these cyber type policies that you may be hearing about, right? A big one that some folks think they still have cyber inside their general or commercial liability, but I'm here to tell you today that pretty much across the board, all carriers actually put now exclusionary language into their general and commercial liabilities that will say anything that is covered in a standalone cyber insurance policy is no longer covered in a general liabilities policy. So, where once upon a time, and this is where some of that confusion has arisen, once upon a time where some folks may have found a bit of cyber in their general, it is across the board not there anymore. I promise you that. And if you would like, we offer free policy reviews. You can send your policy to me. I'll take a look at it anytime and let you know if there in fact is any cyber in it. Another big one is technology errors and omissions. That's really more for customers or smaller to medium sized businesses that are that are offering some sort of software as a service. That's really the technology errors and omissions is going to come into play. It protects you against yourself and any potential, negligence or accidents that you happen while offering some sort of software as a service. Really more designed. A good way to also think of errors and omissions is protecting you from yourself, right? Whereas a standalone cyber liability policy is going to protect you against third party attack, right? It's going to protect against attacks. Errors and omission protects you against yourself. Cyber is designed to protect you against from somebody else who is actually trying to get in and instigate the attack, right? What does it cover though? So we've talked about this standalone policy versus these kind of, other various policies. Another very common one that you might see is a rider or an add-on top of your general liability policy. And the biggest difference between those and a standalone is going to be, of course, the dollars and cents that it costs. They are appealing because they can be very cheap, but they're typically $50,000 in coverage versus $1 million standalone. And then another big difference is what's being covered. So these areas here are what we would typically find in a nice standalone broad coverage cyber insurance policy, but a rider will typically only have maybe one or two maybe of these coverages, and typically they're also very limited. So what you want to look for is broad coverage, broad cyber insurance coverage that is going to cover all aspects of your data breach. So that's including the response, remediation, the IT forensics, the legal teams that are being brought in, all the regulations and authorities that might need to be brought in. Business interruption is also another piece of coverage that will often get dropped as you look at more kind of riders and things like that versus these standalone policies. And then ransomware or cyber extortion is another huge coverage that you want to look for in your cyber policy, and another one that will typically be dropped in those riders or add-ons or endorsements. So it's something to keep in mind as you're looking out at cyber policies. Not all cyber policies are created equal. And in fact, right now, it's a completely unstandardized market. So every carrier technically offers something slightly different, right? But the best are offering very broad coverages that cover all of the things that you see here.
So if someone was to call up their insurance company and just say, "Have I got cybersecurity insurance?" and the cybersecurity insurance says, "Yes, you do they hang up the phone then, or should they be passing along that policy for one of us to have a look at to help them?
Great question. Yes, I would absolutely recommend having an expert, whether it's me or if you happen to find some other expert in cyber insurance, but having an expert in cyber insurance specifically take a look at that, because your local broker, which we love local brokers, we've actually been able to partner up with quite a few local brokers. But the local broker, number one, is typically not going to be incredibly knowledgeable about the cyber insurance side of things. It really does take a little bit of an expert touch,
Right.
and there's a lot that goes on with it. So the local broker is not necessarily incentivized to do a bunch of research and become an expert on cyber insurance right now, when their main, bread is buttered on the general liability side of things. So I highly recommend, yes, work with an expert in the cyber insurance space right now because of that unstandardized nature of the market. It's just a bit all over the place right now. So working with somebody like us who has access to the entire market, we can really see and compare to that entire market, right? We can look at your policy and say, hey, here's the differences that we're seeing compared to the rest of the market, right?
For sure.
Yeah. Great question, though. And it's actually a nice segue into this slide here, because really what we're seeing in the market is a bit of a tiered system, right? Where you really have these better carriers, kind of, you can imagine them at the top of the list. They're the ones offering the best product, right? In terms of the coverage that we just talked about, right? They're the ones offering very broad coverage on all of those areas. They're also the ones who are going to have the best pricing for their coverage, but kind of naturally also going to be the ones who are going to have more of those technological requirements that they're going to ask from you. I always like to mention that it's really kind of three areas that you get to choose two of, right?
Mhm.
You have the technological requirements, you have the cost of the premium, and then you have the actual coverage it's inside, right? And you get to pick two of those, right? You either go for maybe fewer requirements, but that means that you are absolutely going to be sacrificing cost or coverage. So from our side of things, it makes a lot more sense to actually invest in those technological requirements that are going to open the doors to those carriers that have better coverage at a better price. Because at the end of the day, that better pricing typically ends up balancing out any of the extra costs that you might face with getting some of those tools and technologies in place. So you often end up in a much more secure environment with the overall cost
Mhm.
being very low increase or if any at all. So,
And
yeah,
sorry, John.
no,
I
jump
was
in,
just going to
jump
ask.
in,
So
hit me.
if the insurance company too, will like would DataStream look at if somebody that has a managed service provider and cybersecurity tools in place? Does that help to address the pricing issue at all, or is that nothing that they look at all?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, ideally, you want to have, and we'll touch on some of the big hard requirements here
Mhm.
in a second, but ideally, you want to work with, yeah, an IT professional to get some of these basic tools and technologies in place before even applying for insurance. Now, there is a bit of back and forth with the carriers right now where they will say, okay, no, we're not going to cover you right now because you're missing this and this and this. And so sometimes there is a bit of that back and forth that we will have with the carriers and the customers where, we're really trying to figure out both the best internal posture to have, but as well as balancing out, of course, that customer's budget and all of that good stuff. So
Mhm.
at that point, we have a nice back and forth with the carriers where if there is anything at all that they are going to require from that customer, they'll let us know and we'll say, okay, well, let's go ahead and look into this if we want to open that door to that carrier and potentially unlock the cheaper costing and premiums.
Right.
Right now, it's interesting because you're not so much seeing individual carriers give discounting for having better and better posture. It's moving in that direction and absolutely will get there soon. We're starting to see some carriers kind of preliminarily do this where they're offering some discounting, but it's really right now mostly about open and closed doors, right? So having the certain requirements that that specific carrier is looking for is going to open the door to them. And again, unstandardized market. So technically, every carrier has their own list of requirements that they're
Right.
working off of right now, right? And that's exactly where we can come in to help customers navigate this market, specifically with things like our universal application to help guide them through which are at least the majority of those tools that customers are looking for. And this slide is just to give everybody a general idea as to what potentially a good pricing can look like for cyber insurance. Again, unstandardized market, so this can range drastically as you move down the list and away from those carriers that have more of the requirements, but particularly out of those carriers and up at the kind of the upper end of the tier list, the average cost for, and again, this is $1 million policy, which is the most common policy sold right now to the smaller to medium sized space, should be the premium should be in between the 1,500 and $8,000 range. If you're looking at something upwards of $10,000, definitely reach out and talk to us because you're overpaying for your insurance for sure. But this is the purpose of this slide is really just give folks an idea of what to be looking for so that if you're paying quite a bit more than this, definitely reach out and let us know. This is exactly where we've been able to save some customers quite a bit of money because they were even already doing some of those, technology, or excuse me, had already implemented some of those tools and technologies, but
Safeguards.
they just happened to be, yeah, with, one of those carriers that were not necessarily giving any credit for having that tool in place. So
Yeah.
by just going out and doing some shopping, we were able to save them quite a bit of money in the past. And another thing we always look for, something to think about, and a big difference between those carriers at the top of the tier list versus those as you move towards the bottom are a pay on behalf policy versus a reimbursement policy. So what does your claim experience look like? And a pay on behalf policy is offered by the better carriers. It's where a carrier actually comes in and is going to pay on your behalf any of the incident costs right then and there. Versus, as you can imagine, what a reimbursement policy is, the customer has
You
to
pay
come up
us,
with
we'll pay back later.
yeah,
Yep.
and then you're battling that carrier for the foreseeable future, trying to get them in place, right? So
Right.
now we've reached those, yeah, the list of kind of those tools and technologies that specifically I'm talking about what the better carriers are looking for, right? That's the idea behind this slide is to give everybody an idea of what specifically the better carriers with the better pricing, what they are going to be expecting of you. And yeah, offsite cloud backups pretty much going to be a universal requirement across the board.
Hmm.
MFA is one of these. We're actually seeing some preliminary discounting where I have had one or two carriers offer, hey, if this customer goes ahead and implements MFA, we'll actually discount them by 8 to 10% seems to be the range right now. So we're getting some numbers there, but MFA is virtually a requirement across the board, especially to get decent pricing on your coverage. Endpoint detection and response is particularly asked for by the better carriers, as well as from the mid-market customers and the higher risk industries. Like, unfortunately, the healthcare industries is a big one right now, getting hit. Yeah,
Yep.
lawyers. Yeah, exactly. And another big one, cybersecurity awareness training. We already talked about human error, right? And
Yes.
the carriers understand that as well, the risk of human error. And so we are seeing employee cybersecurity awareness training pop up more and more. And it's going to be, I believe, a hard requirement for pretty much everybody very, very soon. So,
And we've actually witnessed this firsthand with with a client where that was the problem, is that the security awareness training wasn't in play, even though we had pushed it, they just didn't do it. And I mean, it really is hard to get everybody to wrap their head around it. And it really, it doesn't take up that much time of your day, but it's just a matter of, getting everybody involved, to get on it. And our clients have been very good for pushing it out and working with their staff to make sure that, that they're doing it. And that's so, but that's the biggest thing. Yeah. It's just, I mean, that human error, that's typically where it starts.
yeah, no, 100%. And it brings up another great point, which is human error on the application itself, right? You want
Right.
to make sure as you're filling out these applications for cyber insurance that you honestly working with an expert like Corey or somebody, an IT expert who has some knowledge on this language that you're going to see in the application and the knowledge of whether or not you as a customer actually have it in place, right? Because this is where some folks are getting into hot water where they're filling out a cyber insurance application and they're just checking the box, yes, yes, yeah, yes, I have all these things.
Right.
Or maybe they just don't know, they're doing the best they can. Welcome claim time, the carrier is absolutely going to do their due diligence, right? And so, in order to ensure a smooth claims process, you really want to ensure your application is as accurate as possible. So, it's really incredibly beneficial to work with an expert, work with somebody who knows the ins and outs of the IT side for your company and can help you walk through those cybersecurity questions and answer them as accurately as possible, because that's exactly where also some of the stigma around cyber insurance claims potentially quote unquote not paying out, that's really where it's coming from, is people making mistakes on their application. It's either that or those riders that we already talked about that can
Right.
be hard to
Right.
get them to get the carriers to pay out on. Those are kind of the two avenues that stigma's coming out of. But yeah, so important to work with an expert to help you navigate that space. And that's honestly exactly what this slide is discussing as well, right? So how do you navigate this landscape? It really is about working with experts, working with somebody to get your cybersecurity house in order, right? Get those basics in place that are at least going to check the box so that you can start getting some cyber insurance options back, right? So that you can at least start seeing what your potential options could be, and then working with an expert on the cyber insurance side as well to make sure you are able to go out there and truly shop at least as most of the market as you can. Because until it gets more standardized, again, every carrier is slightly different. Some carriers more focused on certain industries, certain sizes. So truly right now, one of the best ways to go out and shop for cyber insurance is with an expert like us who can potentially go out and shop amongst a good portion, if not the entire market, right? To make sure that you're getting as many options back as possible. And then to give you a little bit of taste of what that looks like in action, right? This is exactly what it looks like when we work with, the partner, an IT partner of a customer to get some of the better tools in place, unlock the doors to better carriers, better premiums, and get them into a more secure environment. So this is kind of a nice image of what I was just talking about a couple slides ago, right? Where from our point of view, it's a much more secure environment to actually invest in a couple of those extra tools and technologies that's going to unlock the door to reduce premiums, right? It's going to unlock the door to those carriers that are offering cheaper premiums. You can always go to market without those tools and technologies, but most likely you're going to be overpaying and your premium is going to be pretty dang high. So we obviously highly recommend you're going to be in a much more secure environment. Work with somebody like Corey to get those tools in place first, and then we'll go shop and get you the best premium, out there, the best policy out there. And that's exactly what you're seeing here, right? This customer of ours was a chemical-based company that worked with their IT partner to reduce their premium by about 23%, right? It saved them a couple $1,000s. They did this by upgrading their antivirus. They did have to implement a VPN site to site with an MFA solution, and then they also purchased a phishing and spam detection product, right? But by implementing those in place, it dropped their premium by enough to where their total annual net cost was only $30 increase, right?
Well,
and
yeah,
they went much more secure environment.
Go down $11,000 and up their coverage to 3 million from 1 million.
Well, and this is another case study, right? So this is a specific case study, and then a separate case study. Yeah, this is another great example because this company was actually already doing some of these tools and technologies, but they happened to be with a carrier who wasn't giving them credit for it, right? So just by working with us and going to do some shopping amongst the rest of the market, we were able to find them. Yeah, and you're seeing here, we not only were able to find them better coverage by increasing them from 1 million to 3 million, but also save them, like $11,000 at the same time. It's just a byproduct of that unstandardized market. It's a bit of a gamble, especially if you're working with your local broker, who again is great, but might only have access to one or two of those carriers, and so is a gamble that carrier is one of those better carriers who are truly offering the better products.
And having an expert in the field, right? Like knowing the industry is
exactly
critical, and that to know what to offer, and that your standard insurance company may not know the industry or know, like have very much experience in our industry. So it's very hard, and that's why it's good to reach out to, a managed service provider and a company like Datastream and John directly to get the answers that you need to, save some money and have the best coverage that you can.
Exactly. Yeah, it's all about the unstandardized nature of it right now. We were heading in a direction, right? Well, this will eventually get standardized, but it's so different compared to what everybody is used to with the autos and the business owners that are all pretty much the same product at this point, right? And you can even think of some of the commercials, right? Like Geico's, big commercial is all about timing, right? It's not so much that the product is different. It's more 15 minutes is going to save you 15%. So cyber is not like that. It is actually, it is completely unstandardized. So you actually do have these very big differences from carrier to carrier, whether that be, price difference or requirement difference. So that's exactly what we're seeing happen here with that pricing difference, right? Some carriers are really not focused on cyber at all. And so that's why you'll see like $30,000 cyber insurance policy when it's it really should be, as we talked about, in between that $1,500 to $8,000 range
Right.
for $1 million at least. Yeah.
Makes sense.
But yeah, this was a great conversation, Corey. I want to make sure to pause now for any questions and answers people might have. I'm also going to go ahead and drop all of my contact information in the chat below so that people can easily copy and paste that. Obviously, don't hesitate to reach out if anybody has any further questions. But yeah, we'll hang around here for a little bit and make sure to answer any questions that come in. Don't hesitate to drop them in the chat here.
Yeah, sounds good. So if anybody has any questions, please drop them in now, and we'll try and answer them as best we can.
Go ahead and drop in both my email, and let's drop in my phone number for everybody as well. 2839. Bam.
While you're doing that, John, what is the average cybersecurity claim for business in Canada? Do you have those numbers at all, or is that something?
They're actually, and one of the reasons we hadn't necessarily pulled the trigger, we still need to make some of those that translate at least the dollars and cents, but the data itself is fairly similar, because we've actually been looking at that as well. So across the border, for cyber insurance, all the data that we've been looking at has been pretty similar. So you can really think of the dollars and cents even that we're seeing. Obviously, it would have to translate into the Canadian dollars and cents, but in terms of the ranges is really similar. And what the carriers are looking for is all pretty much exactly the same.
Okay. Yeah. And
it's a good question.
If anybody's wondering, like we've been talking a lot about Canada versus US, and that Datastream does have Canadian presence as well. Yeah, you have offices. Is it Toronto, BC, Quebec?
We have I believe we do have somebody up in Toronto right now. The only area of Canada that we can't help is Quebec. Okay. That's the only, because Quebec is Quebec, and it's a language that it's really all about the language and the regulations around insurance. We would have to translate everything into French and all of the stuff that goes into that. Right. Maybe one day, but haven't pulled the trigger on Quebec yet. But everywhere else, we absolutely can assist. And basically what we've done is the legwork of vetting some of the bigger brokerages up there. So we basically found our counterpart in Canada, and we partnered up with them. And so their name is Pervs Redmond, and we're a big fan of them. We've had a really great relationship with them for this past year, and it's been a really smooth process for all of our Canadian customers. So it's really like we are the education side and can help folks navigate. And then the paperwork stuff has to go on Pervs Redmond. So at that point, once we get the application kind of completed and stuff like that, we basically pass it to our counterpart, and they're the ones who come in with the quotes and actually have the quotes for the customers. So okay, it's a 1-2 punch, but this way we basically did the legwork of making sure we can find our counterpart, as opposed to us trying to come in and maybe kind of learn that space. We thought it would actually be even more beneficial to find somebody in Canada, who was already very experienced in it, right? Has been doing it for a couple years, who we could then partner and align with.
Which makes the most sense.
It's been working. Same thing. Yeah, it's been working beautifully. Yeah, because we did try that in the beginning, kind of having our own person and learning the ins and outs on the fly as we were trying to bring on customers. And it was okay, but it's much smoother process now.
Absolutely.
To have our counterpart.
It's the old saying, you can't be everything to everyone all the time.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
So
you got to choose your battles, right?
That's
yeah,
right.
Yeah, exactly.
And you become an expert by specializing in one or two things, and that's what you work towards. Not trying to be a jack of all trades, as we all know, does not work out in the end for anybody. Might be a little bit cheaper, but it will cost you in the end.
Exactly.
For sure.
Exactly. Yep.
What do you see as far as compliance in the insurance industry, as far as like something like the FTC?
Yeah, this is a great point, because we haven't necessarily seen the compliancy and insurance side crossover, only in the sense of we are not seeing the insurance carriers give credit for compliancy just yet.
Okay.
They're keeping them very separate, and basically the insurance carriers, their requirements are they're coming up almost with their own compliancy.
Mhm.
That being said, there is so much crossover between the two, that I I foresee in the future we will start to see, as carriers start looking deeper in the data behind compliancy,
Right.
we will start to see them say, hey, this checks off so many boxes that we were already looking for, so that we can now just ask them, are you HIPAA compliant? Right. And that's all
Right.
we need to ask them. Right now, all the carriers are in this kind of catch up phase after. To be honest, after the pandemic, it really was a fast forward button on the cyber attacks and cyber insurance and all of that. And so the carriers are really kind of in this catch up mode right now where they're building these data sets, right? So that's
Right.
why people might even be familiar with the fact that these cyber insurance questionnaires have gotten longer and longer over the recent years, and
Yes,
a
for
bit
sure.
more
And that's not going to
ambiguous, sometimes.
change.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sometimes
for
tougher
sure.
to answer and things like that. And it's because, yeah, the carriers are trying to really dig into the data, right, and figure out
For
what their
sure.
customers have in place.
And what we found too is that just because you're compliant doesn't mean that you're safe, right? So you can check off all the
Yeah,
boxes and say that you are in compliance with whichever standard your industry is in. It doesn't mean that you're safe or you're secure at all. For sure.
yeah,
You, like again, you've got those things checked off, but it's just a checked off box. You follow the rules as much as you can, but there are definitely ways around it, especially with AI becoming as prevalent as it is. Some of the old standards haven't been updated for a while. Compliancy does not mean secure.
yeah. Absolutely. No. And that's exactly kind of the balance, right? Another way I like to phrase it for customers is, you can think of the tools and even the compliancy is really about trying to prevent it, right? It's really on the front end. It's pre-incident. You got to think of the tools and the compliancy side. Those are pre-incident. These are all things that were designed to hopefully avoid that incident altogether, right?
Mhm.
And insurance is post incident, because we know that there really is no 100% avoiding the risk of that incident. So we also get the insurance to balance out that post incident, right?
Right.
But you really like to think of the compliancy and kind of the tools and technologies as pre incident, designed to hopefully avoid or at least mitigate that incident, right? The severity of that incident. And then insurance is really for you. The incident's already happened, right? It's
Right.
happened. You're in the middle of an incident. Your tools and technology is not necessarily going to help you during the middle of the incident, right? And neither is compliancy during the middle of an
That's
incident.
right.
That's what insurance is for.
Perfect. Well, I don't think we. Has anybody got any questions for us?
Yeah. Any other questions, thoughts? No problem. If not, we also obviously don't hesitate to reach out. Again, if you do already have a policy, definitely recommend getting a policy review from some sort of expert. Doesn't necessarily have to be me, but happy to take a look at anybody's policies just to confirm what your coverage does look like, and whether or not maybe you do have a little bit of cyber hidden away in your general, but I highly doubt it. Pretty much across the board, yeah, it's been taken out of there. So,
Right. Well,
yep,
I
yep.
think we covered it that well, John, that nobody has any questions. So that's I appreciate your time. Thank you
You did a
for
good
joining with
job
me today.
explaining the topic.
I
Yeah,
think we did for sure.
absolutely.
So hopefully everybody was able to take at least something away from this. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to John, or you can reach out to myself, and we'd be happy to guide you in the right direction for sure.
Absolutely. Thank you,
Thank,
everybody, for jumping on. This was a
thank you,
great
everyone,
time.
so much. Appreciate it. Thanks so much, John.
Absolutely. Have a good one, everybody.
And anybody that has any questions, or anybody that wasn't able to attend, this will be available to all of those that at least
Oh, yes,
registered
great point.
afterwards.
Actually, yeah, and this link actually turns into the recording. So we'll make sure, yeah, to get it sent out to everybody. But if anybody's on right now and wants to make sure to pass along the recording, it's actually the same link that was the registration page. after this closes up, it just turns into the recording itself. So kind of one of the nice features of Crowdcast.
That is, but that's perfect.
Yeah, glad you brought that up, Corey. Yeah,
for sure.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks so much, everybody, and thanks, John. We'll talk to you again
everybody. Soon. My pleasure. Have a good one, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.